President, are we in a quorum call?
Yes, we are.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to vitiate proceedings under the quorum call.
Without objection.
Today is the anniversary of the election of President Trump in 2024. And today, as the shutdown of our federal government is officially the longest it's ever been, 36 days, because we can't come to agreement between our parties and our chambers. In fact, the House isn't even at work and hasn't been for weeks because Republicans won't work with us to ensure access to health care. We're in a dangerous and unsettled place here at home. But we're also in a dangerous and unsettled place abroad and around the world. My role in appropriations in this Congress is as the senior Democrat on the committee, the subcommittee, that funds all of our defense and intelligence. And given that role, where I've worked with Senator McConnell, the chairman, to write the bill that we should be moving forward that would fully fund the security apparatus of the United States, I wanted to come to the floor for a few minutes today and talk with my colleagues and our nation about what it is that actually keeps us safe at home and abroad. For my entire life, we have relied upon the U.S. military, and we will soon celebrate Veterans Day next week, when all of us should thank those who have served or who are serving. We've relied on them to be something that we often take for granted: nonpartisan, non-political, and all volunteer, professional, career military. And for that to be sustained, for the folks to continue to step forward and raise their right hand and swear to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, we need a nation that supports our warfighters. For it is our warfighters who answer the call to serve and to defend, no matter what party's in charge, to respect and obey the chain of command and to execute all lawful orders. I think we rely on the best equipped, best trained, most professional military in the world, and in partnership with them, a global network of alliances. We are the envy of the world, not only because of our weapons, the most advanced and sophisticated weapon systems, but because we have the best trained, best respected, most supported military in the world. And that additional factor is something stronger than envy, which is respect. I've traveled over my 15 years here on the Foreign Relations Committee to dozens of countries on literally every continent and have seen directly the respect that other armed forces around the world have for our military, for its civilian control, its professionalization, its training and equipment. I grew up in the shadow of the Vietnam War. It was raging as I was a young man. I still remember being in elementary school with classmates who had older brothers in combat. I still remember as Saigon fell when I was in middle school, and as the POWs, including our former colleague John McCain, were released from years of imprisonment, and being shocked at the way some returning veterans were treated, disrespected, at how there had been a real loss of a sense of respect and appreciation for those who served. Over years, our armed forces have earned their way back to a place of deep and broad respect in the hearts of the American people. Over the years that I served as county executive and I went to ceremony after ceremony as units of the Delaware National Guard deployed over and over, and then often 9 months or a year later, we would welcome them home at wonderful homecoming celebrations. I saw deep and broad support and respect for the men and women of the armed forces of the United States. Tragically, I've also had the opportunity along the flight line at Dover Air Force Base to welcome home America's fallen, to get to know the families grieving over their loss, and this year to be joined by members of the House and Senate as we welcomed home our fallen heroes who had died serving us overseas. The difference in tenor, in respect, in affection for the men and women of our armed forces over the arc of my lifetime, from the 70s during the Vietnam War to today, has been striking. And today, as I rise to speak on the one-year anniversary of President Trump's election, I just wanted to look back and reflect how in that year he and Secretary Hegseth have set us on a course that risks losing again all of that accumulated goodwill, all of that respect. I'm going to talk about how they've weakened our alliances, politicized our military, dulled down our military readiness, and brought us closer to needless, even dangerous wars of choice. All of that leaving us weaker and less safe as we confront the most dangerous world since the end of the Cold War. President Trump is a master of distraction, so you don't ever have time to step back and look at the bigger pattern. It's amazing how many times a day the topics change. Are we talking about the tearing down of the East Wing or planning for a new ballroom? Or a renewed threat to invade a country in Africa, apparently Nigeria this week? It is a constant, unending smorgasbord of tweets and greatest hits designed to prevent us with its blizzard from ever seeing any pattern. Well, 1 year after his election, I wanted to take a few minutes and show that pattern to you today. In his first 10 months as President of the United States, President Trump has fired or pushed out more than 15 of our most senior admirals and generals, starting with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the chief of naval operations, fired because they were somehow considered DEI hires or too woke, something I find to be utterly without foundation in their service or in the opinion of others who served with them in the armed forces. He hijacked the 250th anniversary parade to celebrate the history of the U.S. Army and turned it into a birthday parade for himself. More recently, President Trump and Secretary Hegseth gathered all of our most senior military leaders from around the world for a speech here near Washington in Quantico, a massive national security risk, just so they could give political speeches about grooming and about using the military against the enemy within. Pulling these decorated and seasoned men and women from core jobs literally around the world, protecting America against our adversaries on the front lines to come back and be props for a highly political speech. In unprecedented decisions in modern times, the President has federalized the National Guards from California, from Illinois, from Oregon over the objections of governors, and deployed them into cities over the objections of mayors who say, we can deal with the challenges of crime. If you want to send us federal resources, we'd welcome sending us additional federal law enforcement like the ATF and the FBI. They also, this administration, mobilized the Marines to go in to Los Angeles. All of this takes away our military from their central missions and training for partisan political ends. This brings us to a second key pillar of our national security, the best trained and equipped military in the world. Secretary Hegseth, at the beginning of this year, supported a full-year continuing resolution for the Department of Defense for the first time ever. And Senator McConnell and I, as the chair and ranking of the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, were struck at how much harm that does. We are on the verge of doing it again for a terrible second year. Ask any senior military leader. It makes it impossible to plan, and nothing requires more stable, certain long-term funding than designing and building the next generation of fighter aircraft, building and deploying nuclear-powered submarines, recruiting and training the world's best military, and then equipping them with things on land, air, and sea that make them the most lethal armed forces on Earth. We can't do that if Secretary Hegseth continues to support full-year continuing resolutions. It's also important that our warfighters be respected because they know they have the support and engagement of the American people on difficult and dangerous missions, something that's lacking when they refuse to fully brief, support, and engage the Senate of the United States, a challenge that is happening right now. We need a plan, we need preparation, and we need clarity to Congress about what is going on in the Caribbean, what preparations are being made with regards to Venezuela. I have no objection to the idea that we need to work together to strengthen the interdiction of drugs coming to the United States. But this body, given the Constitution and our role, deserves to be consulted and included so that we can build consensus, common agreement to support a plan of action so that our warfighters, the men and women of our armed forces, know we have their back. That is the best way to send them into harm's way. All of this is built on another of President Trump's broken promises. He ran on lowering costs, making America healthy again, and avoiding new foreign wars. On the campaign trail, I often heard that was one of his most popular promises. Since then, the threats to start new wars with friends and allies and foes alike have been dizzying. Canada, Mexico, Denmark, Panama, Colombia, Nigeria. Our president tosses these things off casually. But in a meeting I had early in his term with leaders from Denmark and Greenland, they were alarmed, frightened, concerned about how a trusted NATO ally could threaten to seize Greenland. A seemingly casual remark that was then reinforced and repeated over and over. And I am worried that we are now sleepwalking into a war with Venezuela and an effort to overthrow Maduro, all while leaving the People's Republic of China freer rein to run roughshod over the Indo-Pacific while they massively increase the scope and scale of their aggression. Let's be clear, there's no love lost between me and Maduro, a brutal dictator, but we should have clarity about how and why we might use our armed forces. Last, a key pillar to our security for the last 8 decades since the end of the Second World War has been a remarkable global network of powerful alliances. I've long said one of our key advantages over the People's Republic of China is our network of trusted and deep alliances. China has nervous neighbors and client states, and President Trump is putting all of that at risk. Our adversaries are increasingly aligning. Russians are using Iranian drones, North Korean soldiers, and Chinese technology and funding to help carry out their brutal war of aggression in Ukraine. Meanwhile, our alliances are fraying. As I mentioned, the president threatened to invade NATO allies like Canada and Denmark, kicked President Vladimir Zelensky out of the Oval Office, but rolled out the red carpet for Vladimir Putin, held up crucial arm deliveries and sales to nations that rely on us for their security, from Ukraine to Taiwan, and put at risk our commitment to Article 5 and to collective security that's been at the heart of NATO since its founding. The tariff deals our president has imposed on some of our closest and most trusted allies, allies that have free trade agreements with us, like South Korea, has put them profoundly on the back foot as they look at whether they can count on our security agreements. All of this means that over the past year, President Trump has steadily hacked away at the pillars of our military that protect our nation, making it less stable, making it more likely that the trust and confidence the American people have in our warfighters will crumble. This is a critical and concerning, even alarming picture from which he's trying to distract us. The nation we had a year ago was strong, secure, and moving in a positive direction. Today, I'm gravely concerned about the constant distraction and the threats and moves against our allies, our partners, and the ways in which we have undermined our warfighters. So what should we do from here? Pass our bipartisan appropriations bills. Put on this floor, pass, and get to the president the defense appropriations bill that I've worked so hard on this year, and all the other appropriations bills that move us out of this cycle of rescissions and reconciliation and continuing resolutions and back to reliable, steady bipartisan support. Strengthen our alliances, reassure our nervous partners, end this recklessness with tariffs that is an on-again, off-again regime where these taxes, these tariffs, add to Americans' bottom line in a disastrous way and destabilize trust and confidence from our partners, and refocus on training and preparing for real wars, not culture wars. This is how we keep our nation safe. Just a few days ago, I was up in my father's hometown of Boston and drove through Lexington and Concord, where 250 years ago this year, our forefathers took up arms against the crown and began what was a long-shot fight, a revolution for liberty and independence for our nation. We have to remember all who have taken up arms and served our nation, I'm from a family of veterans. My brother, my sister-in-law, my father, my uncles, my great-great-grandfather, and back to the Revolution, members of my family have stepped forward and served. For all who have done the same, who've signed on the dotted line up to and including their lives, committed their willingness to sacrifice, we owe them nothing less than the full measure of devotion that says we will support them. That support requires engagement and trust from this body, engagement and trust with our allies, and the support that our servicemen and women deserve. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.